Again, I just wanted to say good afternoon to everyone. We'll start in just 1 minute after we give everybody a chance to join us here. Thanks so much for waiting.
Emily, as you're getting ready to get started, our chat's already a little bit busy. So if you'll forgive me, I'll just share a couple things from here. Yes, the recording will be available on our website afterwards. And if you can't hear us now, then the audio is not working. We were just waiting to get started to give folks a couple minutes to join. And I will back away now.
Thanks, Christy. I think this is a good time to get started and kick off this conversation. So again, thank you everyone for joining us today for the Home Energy Rebate Program's public listening session. We're joined today by several of my colleagues here at the Oregon Department of Energy, and I will have them introduce themselves as we go through this presentation. My name is Emily Salmeri. I am one of our federal grants officers here at ODO, and I work to help bring some federal dollars into the state, such as these rebates that we'll be working on together over the coming years. Next slide, please. All right, just an introduction into what we'll be going through today. To start, I will give you a background on where this funding comes from, a rough timeline, some related programs that we have here at ODO, as well as background on the Justice 40 initiative. And then we'll jump into the specific programs, the HERE program, as well as the HOMES program, and we'll have some time for a little Q&A. And then from there, we're going to flip the tables around on you all and ask some questions of you. Next slide, please. All right. And before we jump into the home energy rebates, just a quick introduction to the Oregon Department of Energy, or ODO, as you might hear us referred to if you're new to our agency. On this slide, you'll see our vision, mission, and what we do. Our mission is to help Oregonians make informed decisions and maintain a resilient and affordable energy system. We advance solutions to shape an equitable, clean energy transition, protect the environment and public health, and responsibly balance energy needs and impacts for current and future generations. Under what we do, you'll see the services we provide and how we achieve our mission. The funding opportunities that we'll be discussing today will help ODO support a resilient and affordable energy system, as well as a clean energy transition. Next slide, please. All right, and if you're new to using WebEx, the platform that we're using today for this conversation, here's a quick guide on how you can use some of the features. All of our attendees are off camera right now and muted, but our host will unmute you if we call on you to ask a question. You can see the option to raise your hand on both the right-hand side of your screen under the participants panel if you click near your name. There's also an option at the bottom of your screen where you can see a visual of a hand in the reactions bar. Feel free to use the chat function to ask questions and make comments, and make sure to send those to all panelists or everyone so that all of the ODO staff can see it and help respond. We'll also try to get to as many questions in the chat and through raised hands, but we may not have time for all of them today, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. I noticed that some people have called in on the phone. You can press *6 to raise your hand and *3 to unmute yourself when we call on you, and the host unmutes you from our end. And then I want to make sure you know that today's listening session is being recorded, and the recording will be posted to our website later on today. Next slide, please. Thank you. All right. So jumping into the home energy rebates, this is going to be a little background on where they came from and how they came to be. So the US Congress passed a large federal package known as the 2022 Inflation Reduction Act, or the IRA, as some of you might hear it referred to, that included a number of grants, tax incentives, and rebates to help consumers lower their energy usage and save on energy bills. The home energy rebates are actually a pair of programs that are available to states through the US Department of Energy. So the rebates are two separate but complementary grant programs that the ODO will apply to through the US Department of Energy. We will apply for those federal dollars through a grant application process, which includes laying out a plan for how to offer rebates to residents within the state for approved purposes. These applications could not begin until the US Department of Energy provided the requirements of the applications and guidance and clarification on any federal policies. The initial guidance was released at the end of July, and many of the program policies were laid out in the federal guidance. So while many are left to the individual states to determine, that will be a part of our application process. Two of my colleagues who will be discussing both of these programs a little bit later, Will and Stephanie, will give an overview of each of these programs, and we'll ask some questions regarding areas where ODO has to design policies for these programs. You'll see HOMES is the Home Efficiency Rebate Program, otherwise known as HOMES, and those are going to be performance-based rebates for energy efficiency retrofits. The second program, lovingly called HERE, are going to be the Home Electrification and Appliance Rebate Program. And these rebates are for high efficiency electric appliances and certain associated upgrades. Oregon will not have the funds for these programs until the grant applications have been accepted, negotiated, and an award has been given to the Department of Energy here in Oregon. The deadline for applying for these funds is January 31st, 2025. And designing the programs is going to take a lot of careful planning, but we understand the excitement and the anticipation and are working hard to have an application submitted. So we have a goal to have the rebates available much sooner. They may be available as early as mid-2024. Next slide, please. All right. And another little background on some common confusion that comes up. The rebates are not the same as tax credits. So unlike the home efficiency or home energy rebates, the energy efficient home improvement credit is available this tax year through the IRS. So the home energy rebates will be administered at the state level, whereas tax credits are administered by the IRS. Rebates are going to be a reimbursement or will provide a cost discount for eligible upgrades, whereas these tax credits you can do with your tax return. And you'll see on the right-hand side of the screen there some of the components and some links that you can utilize to get more information on those tax credits available through the IRS. We, I should mention, are not tax professionals at ODO, so you'll have to speak with a licensed tax professional to inquire about these tax credits. Next slide, please. All right. Now, these are going to be some of the programs that we have working together here at the Oregon Department of Energy. We are involved in a number of different home energy programs, and we're preparing for the energy rebates by aligning our program goals and policies from several different complementary programs. So the two that we're talking about today are going to be the Homes and Here programs, which are the two federal grant programs that can help you upgrade your home and appliances with the energy saving technologies. Those programs are going to be supported by the TREC that you see there, which is an acronym for another federal program that we're working on for the residential electrification contractors. These are grants that will be coming to Oregon, and we'll utilize this funding to provide sub-grants to existing programs in our state to educate and train new and existing workers, such as electricians and plumbers, to name a few, on energy efficiency technologies. So this will help to ensure that Oregon is prepared with a qualified workforce to implement the upgrades and appliances in the rebate programs. We also have a state-funded program that we internally like to call the one-stop shop. The legislature recognized the need to streamline the approach to connect Oregonians with available funds for energy-related projects with HB 3166, which they passed in the 2023 legislative session. The bill tasks ODA with creating a single resource that Oregonians can use to navigate the variety of incentives and rebates available to them. This one-stop shop is directed to provide information, technical assistance, and assistance in identifying contractors and financing options related to energy efficiency incentives and programs. Other state-funded programs that we have going on, there's a lot more here, but one of them is going to be our heat pump programs. We actually have 2 state-funded heat pump programs. One is the Community Heat Pump Deployment Program, which is implemented by regional partners and is a $10 million program offering incentives to support heat pump installations for homeowners. The second is our Oregon Rental Home Heat Pump Program, which is going to be $15 million. And it's implemented by the Oregon Department of Energy in supporting heat pump installations in rental homes. All right, next slide, please. So you'll hear us talk a little bit today about Justice 40, and I wanted to give you a little bit of background of what Justice 40 actually is if you aren't familiar with it. On January 27th, 2021, President Biden signed Executive Order 14008, which set forth prioritizing actions to tackle the climate crisis. Included was the Justice 40 initiative, which directs that 40% of the benefits of certain federal investments flow to communities that are marginalized, underserved, and overburdened. The home energy rebates are programs covered under the Justice 40 initiative, and it's ODO's intent to achieve those goals with these rebates in Oregon. Excuse me, the Council on Environmental Quality was tasked by the White House with defining disadvantaged communities. They used a number of data sets to show the communities that are most overburdened and underserved in the following categories: fossil dependence, energy burden, environmental and climate hazards, and socioeconomic vulnerabilities. Some examples include housing and energy costs, low income, lack of indoor plumbing, and wildfire risk. Those are just a few. These communities are determined at the census tract level, which are small units of geography. Boundaries for statistical data is determined once every 10 years by the U.S. Census Bureau. And additionally, lands within the boundaries of federally recognized tribes are also included. And there's a link here on the right-hand side that, that can take you to that screening tool that we call the CGEST map. All right, now I'll turn it over to my colleague, Christy Splitt, and we'll go to the next slide.
Thanks, Emily. Hi, everyone. My name is Christy Splitt, and I also work for the Department of Energy. I'm generally a government relations coordinator, but they like to bring me along for events like this too. And my job today will be to moderate what we hope to have be a robust conversation about the program design for these 2 new programs that the U.S. Department of Energy is working with us to stand up over the next several months. And we've got a big crowd today, which is really wonderful. I'm so glad you've all joined us. And I just want to share a couple of reminders about sort of the scope of our conversation today, and also give you some ways to get in touch if you have more specific questions about a particular project. So today we're doing a general overview, and we're not going to deeply delve into the technical aspects of the program. I know we have some folks on the line that are technical experts on energy efficiency projects, and we want to hear from you. And so we have 2 opportunities to get in the weeds, if you will, on those sort of more complex parts of the program implementation. And we'll have one of those conversations next week on October 10th. That'll be about the whole home retrofit side. And then same time next day on October 11th, we'll have that conversation about the home electrification, electric appliance rebates. So we hope that if you want to get in the weeds, you come to those, but we're glad you're here today to listen as well. And if you want to ask questions from like the perspective of a general member of the public, that'd be great. We also just wanted to open the door. We know some of you might come in today wanting to ask us, well, will my specific project qualify? And there's no way we can get all the information we would need to answer that question in a meeting like this. We also know that we don't even know exactly how the program's going to work. That's why we're meeting today. So we wouldn't even be able to answer some questions as well. So we have 2 email addresses here. I'll also put them in the chat when I'm done talking in a second so that you have a place where you can write those specific questions about your specific project, because we'd be happy to talk with you offline about your specific questions. So with that said, we'll have a lot of time to talk at the end of Stephanie and Will's presentations, but we're also happy to kind of take questions about like the slide in front of us as we go along here and there, unless it seems like, given the large number of people, it's just better to wait till the end. So I'll be keeping an eye on the chat. That's a place where you can ask questions or make comments. And then I'll also be looking for hands raised, that little, I think it looks a little bit like a fist or like a little bit of a hand up in the bottom of your screen. And then I'll call on hands as we go if possible, or like I said, we could, just given the number of people and time, wait till the end. So with all of that said, hopefully expectations clear. I'm excited to turn it over to Stephanie Cruz.
Thanks, Christy. So I'm going to talk a little bit more specifically about the HOMES program. You may have heard it referred to as the Whole Home Efficiency Rebate Program. That's gotten a little bit shortened to HOMES and how we refer to that program. This is a performance-based home energy efficiency rebate program. Individual households and multifamily households will be potentially eligible for the program. But the requirement to participate is actually that the project that's being proposed needs to demonstrate a minimum savings in order to be eligible. And the demonstrated part can be either a measured or a modeled approach. Modeling energy efficiency typically happens in advance of a project, and it will require some kind of an energy assessment where a professional with certain technical skills is going to review the existing energy use of the home and the equipment within it, and then estimate the cost of the project and the savings potential of the project to save energy. So with a modeled approach, the minimum energy saving is 20%. And then with a measured approach, that means that the energy savings are going to be looked at after the project is complete. Typically, there's a review period of like 6 to 9 months afterward, where that's when the measurement of whether or not the project saved the minimum amount of energy is made. And for that approach, the minimum savings would be 15%. There's higher rebates available for households that save 35% or more. And so this means that this program is going to be specifically targeted at households that are doing multiple projects in order to achieve energy efficiency savings of this magnitude. One of the things we wanted to highlight, because we've been getting lots of questions about it, is this question of retroactivity. So the U.S. Department of Energy has said that they will allow for retroactivity within the program, and we're considering allowing this type of retroactivity. Specifically, it would be probably a more limited energy or retroactivity, making certain upgrades eligible to receive a rebate. However, there have been a lot of concerns that we were trying to work through on how projects that are already complete could meet these program requirements that aren't fully defined yet. And most states have reservations about the technical logistics and challenges in meeting equity requirements if retroactivity is allowed. So we'll talk more about that later and have an opportunity for you all to weigh in. Christy jumped on.
I did. I just had a question that seems perfect for right now. Is it a specific assessment that needs to be used, or would any kind of home energy assessment be okay?
That's a great question. The legislation, the IRA bill that actually authorized this funding, specifically points to a BPI 2400 standard that must be followed. So we are working through what already exists in Oregon that can be either if it can already meet based on the BPI standard based on the way the programs are currently operating, or whether we need to do work within that contractor training funding to support professionals in getting the skills needed to do BPI 2400 compliant assessments. We're leaning towards doing a modeled approach and trying to train up our home energy score network, because there's a lot of professionals already working in this space, to make sure that they have the tools that they need to do these assessments and help people get prepared for this program. All right, and then the next slide, for those that aren't very familiar with energy efficiency, I wanted to highlight the types of energy efficiency projects that might be eligible under this program. This is much more loosely defined because the only real metric is whether or not it results in energy efficiency savings. But the different types of upgrades could include energy management strategies like installing smart thermostats, installing more efficient heating or cooling equipment like heat pumps, high efficiency condensing furnaces, on-demand water heaters, other similar technology, and weatherization measures like air sealing or adding insulation to your house. So I am going to turn it over to Will at this point. He's going to talk a little bit more about the HERE program to make sure that you're familiar with the basics for that one.
Great. Thank you, Stephanie. My name is Will Mulhern. I'm an energy analyst at the Oregon Department of Energy, and as Stephanie mentioned, I'll be covering the HERE program. That stands for the Home Electrification and Appliance Rebate Program. So this is a point of sale rebate program for electric appliances and associated electric and weatherization upgrades. It is income qualified. That's a key difference between the HOMES program. And only households below 150% of the area median income are eligible for this rebate program. So there's a little nuance to that as well. Households below 80% of the area median income are eligible for rebates that cover the full project cost, up to $14,000. I'll cover that in a subsequent slide. While households between 80% and 150% of the area median income are eligible for rebates that cover the full project cost, again, up to $14,000. Or excuse me, I misspoke there. Below 80% of the area median income is the full project cost, up to $14,000. If you're between 80% and 150% of the area median income, you're eligible for 50% of the project cost. So it does still have that same cap of $14,000. And I'll talk a little bit more about the specific numbers in a future slide. I want to note that this program is for all types of housing, so it includes rental housing and multifamily buildings. And I also want to note this last bullet here. So different from HOMES, this program is not retroactive, and that is according to the rules laid out by the U.S. Department of Energy in establishing the guidance for how states can establish this program. So in Oregon, we do not have flexibility within that particular statute to change that. So these rebates will only be available for projects after the program has launched, which we anticipate will be at some point next year, potentially as early as the middle of 2024. So we can move on to the next slide.
Well, as you do move on to the next slide, we had a couple of questions on the income side. Do you want to wait for those or do you want to take them now?
I'd be happy to take them now.
Great. Okay. One of the questions is, in order to be, let's see, we've got three. Is the income based? Well, I guess let's start with this one. In order to be eligible for the rebate, do you have to own the home?
You do not, the rebate would go to the homeowner. So a tenant would not receive the rebate, but a tenant could speak with the homeowner to initiate a rebate to receive that equipment in their home.
Great. And then in the case that there is a situation where a landlord is applying on behalf of a tenant, let's say, is the income based on the homeowner or the renter?
The income is based on the renter. So it's who's actually occupying the unit. And in multifamily buildings, it's sort of aggregated. So a certain percentage of households within the building need to be within that income threshold.
Great. I think that the third question that was related, I think basically just got answered, but Kara, if you disagree, let me know and we'll move on. Oh, and then the next question I think maybe is a complicated one and maybe we don't know the answer yet, which is how is income qualification verified?
Yeah, I'll maybe give the best answer we can. So that's one of the key kind of design components that we're thinking through and figuring out a strategy for. I will say that one of the aspects of that will be conditional eligibility based on participation in a similar income qualified program with similar standards. And the U.S. Department of Energy has released the programs that would be eligible for that type of verification. So it includes the Weatherization Assistance Program and the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program and a few other income qualified programs. So that will be one avenue, but as a state, one of the key design elements we're working through is figuring out the most efficient way to verify income.
We're getting, it's just keeping coming, Will, but so we can cut off if we need to, but I have two more right now. Net income or taxable income?
That's an excellent question. My hunch is that it's gross income, but I would need to confirm that in the guidance. That's a great question, and we'll be clear on that when we release the program rules.
And then finally, and then I think I'll cut us off for now. If there's anything else in the chat, I'll wait till the next natural break. This one's like a little bit, the other ones were like very related to income. This one's a little bit different, but I think it fits the slide in front of our faces, which is, will rebates be available for houses with primarily electric heat, or do they need to be switching from natural gas? And then let you take that and go on.
Sure. So they don't need to be switching. So if you have electric resistance heating and are interested in a heat pump, that is something that we would anticipate will be eligible based on the guidance we have from the federal government right now. The new electric equipment needs to be the primary heating source for that house, for that household. So that's the guidance we have currently. Hopefully that answers that question. And that's actually a pretty nice segue into the next slide, which is, what is electrification? What does that term kind of mean? So the U.S. Department of Energy has identified this as an electrification program, and I want to provide just a little bit more background on what that means. Again, this is language that comes from the federal government, and we're interpreting that as best we can to ensure we can bring this funding into Oregon and deliver on our state's goals. So electrification generally refers to changing the source of energy from combustion of a direct fuel to electricity. Probably the most straightforward example to think through this would be switching from a gas furnace that combusts gas to generate heat to a heat pump, which uses electricity to move heat around and heat a space. Electrification is generally accepted as a key component of decarbonization and emissions reduction plans. And while some forms of electricity, of course, emit carbon dioxide when they're generated and other greenhouse gases, Oregon has in place plans to reduce these emissions to meet the various targets we have in the state. So the idea generally is that we electrify the end uses and we simultaneously focus on making our grid cleaner to greatly reduce the greenhouse gas emissions and achieve the targets that we've set in the state through a variety of channels. So I'll move on to the next slide if I could. Thank you. So here I just want to show a table, as I mentioned before, with some more specifics on what exactly is eligible. So you can see most appliances are covered along with materials and weatherization to support efficiency. So on the far right column here, you can see the maximum rebate amount for each piece of equipment. The total amount available for a single household, as I mentioned earlier, is $14,000. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. However, remember that for a household with an income between 80 and 150% of the area median income, you can only get a rebate that covers half the project cost. So for a more concrete example of that, if you install an $8,000 heat pump and your income is below 80%, you will get the full $8,000 rebate up to the rebate limit if you're below 80% of the area median income. If you're between 80% and 150% of the area median income and you install that same $8,000 heat pump, you're going to get $4,000 for that rebate. However, the maximum amounts per appliance and per household are the same regardless of income level. So it's really just a matter of where the rebate can cover the full amount or only half the project cost. So you could imagine that if you're in that kind of middle income, 80 to 150%, you still have that $14,000 limit. There might be opportunity to do a wider breadth of measures, but there's going to be some cost sharing on the part of the homeowner to cover the second half that the rebate would not cover, whereas opposed to the low income end of things, you'll get the full project cost in the form of the rebate. So we can go on to the next slide and then we can get back to some of these questions once we wrap this up real quick. So which program is best for you? I'll conclude with a quick note to try to get you some information on what might be best for the types of projects you're thinking about. I want to emphasize, as we've said a few times, we are very much still designing these programs, and that's part of why we're conducting this type of outreach and getting input. We don't fully know what they're going to look like in the end yet, and so we can't say for certain what will be most applicable to your situation, but we do want to outline some of the key differences to help you start to think through what might be eligible for the types of work you're looking to do. So on the home side of things, as Stephanie outlined, this is a performance-based rebate. So it requires a minimum savings, which means several upgrades or measures are likely going to be needed to be eligible to meet that threshold. Any energy saving measure, however, is going to be eligible so long as it contributes to that net savings that you're looking to achieve. And the rebate amounts are generally lower, so the program might work best in combination with utility incentives or other state incentives that might be available. On the here side, the big difference here is that it's income restricted. So you are not eligible for the HERE program if you're above 150% of the area median income. And it's also only applicable to specific electric appliances as outlined in the previous slide. However, beyond that, there's not quite as many restrictions. There's not a specific target you have to meet to get that rebate. You just have to install the eligible equipment. And then I'll just close by noting that the funds can't be used on the same measure, but they can be used by the same household for different projects. So that's important to keep in mind. If you install a heat pump and you get the HERE rebate for that, you can't also attribute the savings of that heat pump towards a home's rebate. However, if you get that HERE rebate and then you do additional weatherization measures that meet the threshold for energy savings, you can also claim a home's rebate if that's something you're interested in doing. So there are ways to combine them within a household, but they cannot be used on the same project. And that's a federal requirement that these are kept separately and not funding the same project in those situations. So I can pass it back to Christy to lead us through some Q&A, but it looks like there's some questions in the chat, so I'm happy to maybe address some of those first. And I can't hear you, Christy. I'm not sure if that's me.
Just forgot to come off mute. It's fine. Thanks for letting me know. Yeah, I was just going to say we've got quite a pileup in the chat. So if we could get Steph back, I think let's go ahead and have a nice little back and forth between the two of you here, because the questions I think are sort of a mix of for HERE and not for HERE. So let's see. I'm going to start, I just for those who are following the chat, I've been getting some questions privately too that I feel like we should answer for the good of the whole. So we did get a question. I'm going to wait for this one, but I just want to flag it that we're waiting on this one, but we got asked a question on how these programs will interact with existing programs at their energy trust. So just hang tight. I haven't forgotten about that one, but I thought I'd start with the ones that are more specific to HERE. So first of all, I got a question about whether or not, and this might be for both programs. Why don't I wait for this one? Okay, so the next one was, there's a timing question that's also general but really fast. And it's when is the release of the final information? And I'll just say our goal is to turn in our application as soon as we can. We think that's sometime in the spring. And that's when we would have information on at least what we are sending in as our proposal for what this program will look like. And then we'll hear back from the feds if they think our plan sounds good or not. And then final information would come out when we're able to open the program, whenever that is, based on when we get the money in hand. I think that's a fair answer, and anybody's welcome to tell me I'm wrong. Here's income-based questions. Is income based on the previous tax year?
So that'll be determined once we develop the process for income verification. So I would anticipate that it will be based on the most recent W-2. I don't know that for certain. Again, another option for income verification is that conditional verification, which would be separate than the previous tax year. So that's probably something that will need to be worked out as we develop the more nuanced income guidelines. And
then I'm just going to keep on the topic of income related questions. Is the area median income based on state or county?
So it's a county level is what was released in the guidance. There's a HUD calculator. I can link that in a moment, but there's a definition from the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development that sets the guidelines for area median income, which is based on the county level.
Okay, so I think there's a question about why the tenant income affects the rebate. And I think that's to make sure that tenants will qualify or projects will qualify for the program because the landlord or the homeowner could be more well off than the tenant. And the program is designed to help have benefits flow to low to moderate income populations. So that's why tenant income. You can feel free to add more to that if you'd like. Quick one, do any of these programs apply to solar in any way? I think that's a no. And what is the authoritative source for determining your area median income? The HUD calculator will be helpful for answering that one, right?
Yep. Yeah, that'll be right on there.
Okay. Oh my gosh, there are so many questions. Okay. So that was all the ones that were related to income. We did get one related to electrification specifically, and it was, does the program would the program work for switching from heating oil to electric?
Yes, so long as the electric source becomes the primary heating source for that household.
Great.
And
I
chime in
go
on
ahead,
the
please.
home side on that one, Christy.
Yeah.
The homes program does not require electrification, but it also doesn't disallow it. So if you wanted to switch in a project that you're applying for rebates under that program, it would be eligible there as well.
Great, thanks, Stephanie. And then we've got a question back for Will. Is a home audit required for here?
No, it is not. It's just for the purchase of the specific appliance. So there's the list of appliances. There's no other audit required to access that.
And we have a question. Does the legislation say if the 50% of total project cost is calculated before or after other utility rebates are included?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I believe it's from the initial total. So essentially what will likely need to happen is the contractor, if they're the one installing the equipment, will provide an itemized bill of the total, and then off of that, they will take the applicable rebate. So it'll be the 50% rebate for the HERE program, if that's the situation. And then I believe there would be additional utility rebates on top of that. There will not be a situation, to be clear, where the rebate amount exceeds the total cost of the project so that the person is, making a profit from rebates. That's something that we don't want happening. So hopefully that clears that up a little bit.
Great. Hopefully that does too. A couple of related questions. Are the rebates available to developers of new low-income housing?
Yes, the rebates are available for new housing, including multifamily projects, which I'm guessing might be the question there.
Yeah.
But yes, it's new and existing households.
Multifamily projects with, is it correct? So I'm going to read you a statement. Multifamily projects with 50% of incomes below the threshold qualify. True or false?
Yes, that's correct for the full rebate amount. I believe the threshold is that 50% of the units in the building must be occupied by tenants with incomes below 80% of the area median income. So yes, 50% is that threshold that's outlined in the guidance. Sorry, that's a lot of percentages I'm explaining, but in this case, the 50% refers to the number of households in the building.
So and Steph, feel free to weigh in if I think this is the kind of one that could be either one of you. For instant rebates, who is covering the money up front? Is it the contractor, and how long will it take for contractors to be paid?
Yeah, I can take that. That's probably more applicable to here. So that's part of the workflow that's going to be worked out, and that's something that we're hoping to get feedback on to make sure that that's as smooth as possible. I will say we understand that small contractors and small businesses are not in a position to front significant rebates, and we wouldn't expect that to be a situation that would work well. So we want to figure out a strategy for making sure that that's not the case. But unfortunately, at this time, we're still in the stages of designing workflows and thinking through what that will look like. That will be a very good question for discussion next week as we get into more of the technical details around these programs as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's see. I've got one that's kind of related to retroactivity, and one I think there's probably plenty of people that'd be interested in this answer, even though it's a little specific to a single person. But we're getting a question about, can you explain the retroactivity thing again? And just to be clear, for the HERE program, the feds have already told us no retroactivity. Steph, would you like to talk again about homes retroactivity, where we maybe do have some options there, but limited?
Yeah, absolutely. So the U.S. Department of Energy has said that for the homes program, retroactivity is allowable. But they haven't issued any guidance around what types of retroactivity would look like, or any recommendations on that front. So they're leaving it entirely up to states to figure out how to comply with the federal guidelines if they would choose to allow retroactivity. So Oregon Department of Energy has not said no at this point, but we are looking at all of the challenges and the ramifications of potentially allowing retroactivity. One of the major concerns within that is if we do allow retroactivity, then the program kind of would wind up being a first come, first serve, and might make it really challenging to meet the required Justice 40 requirements and other equity guidelines that we're trying to uphold within the program. So we're working through what it would mean, what we can actually functionally administer within the scope of the program, because we have limited administrative funds, and what's practical. So we know that there's a lot of desire for retroactivity for projects, but we still would have to meet that minimum savings amount for projects in the homes program. So even just applying that standard, it might really significantly reduce the number of projects that have already occurred or who are going to occur between now and when the program starts that might be eligible. So that's not to say that, like I said, that we're not considering it, but there's just a lot to work through on that front.
Thanks for explaining that again, and hopefully that helped, like hearing it again helped it sink in, that there's two different answers on this one. The other thing that I want to quickly add is that there are heat pump programs that are coming online that are state programs that are being led by regional administrators. And one of those programs is Opening Any Day, or just opened in like the South Central a state region like Lake County, Klamath County, for example. So those programs will be starting to open up for homeowners as well. So for folks that have the concern, like, hey, I want to get a heat pump now, are you telling me I have to wait to use this program? And for at least the HERE program, that is what we're telling you, that you will have to wait to do that until the program's open if you want to use this program. But there's that tax credit available and a state rebate that'll be available coming really soon. So just keep your eye on the state programs coming online too, so that you don't feel like you're stuck waiting for some. There are a couple people with a question like that.
Yeah, can I jump in and add something on that point too? I think the tax credits are really valuable as well from my read of them. So if you have a tax burden, I recognize that that's not applicable to everyone, but if you do have a tax burden, I believe the credit for a heat pump is up to $2,000. So it is a meaningful amount of money. So I do want to outline that those are relatively generous tax credits and they are available immediately.
Right. And so in a lot of ways,
they stack up with your utility incentives, and they aren't exclusive of the state programs as well. So if you're eligible for multiple programs, the tax credit combined with some of these other resources that are available now might mean that it makes sense for you to do your project sooner rather than trying to wait for these programs.
All right, it's just gonna keep coming this morning. Okay, so that's why we're here today. We'd like to ask you all some questions, so hopefully we can get to that. It's a big hope of mine right now. So we have a question that's pretty simple, I think. Will either of these programs be available to shelter providers?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. They would be, yes, so long as they're providing housing. I will have to look specifically in the guidance, but my hunch would be that yes, those will be eligible. Particularly for the HERE program, it might work out a little better in that situation.
Yeah. We got a question about what kind of input processes we're planning to determine our state plan proposal. That starts today. We're going to be meeting with folks that work in these related fields, to get their input on the application here soon, and then kind of working to put together. We have those two more in-depth, like in the weeds meetings coming up next week. And then we'll also do sort of some, do public outreach work to take a look at when we have sort of like a plan in place, like, hey, everybody, what do you think of the plan? Ask us questions about it, poke holes in it with us. And that way we can make it even better. So hopefully that's a nice short answer on our process, and folks are welcome to say more if you'd like on that one. Okay.
Emily was gonna add in, we have an input form that we'll link up here that follows the questions we're going to ask you, asking for specific points of input. And within that, there's space for you to kind of freeform provide input that you have that maybe we haven't specifically asked for. So that comment portal is going to be open for the duration of our program development, and we would welcome you to chime in via that if you come across anything that you think is important that we be aware of. We're also open to connections to if you know of a program that we should be working with closely and aligning with, those kind of things. We'd love to hear from you.
Now here's some more. I haven't forgotten the ETO question. Now I'm worried like my plan of waiting until we get into the next section to handle that question might be bad, but is funding for both programs expected to last the full 10 years?
So I'll take us kind of a little bit of a poke at that question, and Will, feel free to chime in. I know Will's done a little bit more work around the number of potential households that this funding can reach. So depending on how we focus the program, which we're looking for input on, the rebates can be limited and reach like 15 to 20,000 households. Or if we wind up kind of targeting more households and lower rebates, then we might be seeing a higher number of households that are reached through this program, or these two programs together. Will, what was the upper bounds that we were thinking based on our modeling that we have been looking at?
As far as households reached between the two programs, I think our very rough estimate was probably around 15,000, kind of on the upper end of things. If I'm remembering that correctly, I would say on the point of will the funding be expended before the end of the 10-year period, I would think that there's certainly potential for it to be. I guess that's part of the program design decision, is how that money is allocated, whether there's a certain amount set aside each year, or whether there's a kind of just a pot that is continuously pulled from until it's exhausted. Part of that depends on the U.S. Department of Energy and how they're going to be delivering that funding. So one thing we know is they're going to be sending that to us in kind of tranches that are sent upon meeting a certain requirement from the previous year. So I would expect that it will be over a period of time, and it's not going to be a situation where we see all of that funding expended right out of the gate. I hope that wasn't too confusing of an answer.
I just wanted to jump in really quick and add on to that. It is actually 8 years, not 10 years. So the funding needs to be expended by September 30th, 2031.
Right, because it takes a while from when the bill passes to get the guidance, create the programs, and get them going. So yeah, that makes sense. Good call. Thanks for the clarification. This is a question we've noodled on that it's almost like a comment to me in a way, because I know it's something we've been thinking about. I'm not sure if we have the answer. How will programs ensure the landlord will not raise rent or evict for low-income tenants once the structure is improved?
Yeah, I can maybe start by taking a swing at that. That's very important to us. So we want to make sure that tenants are better off because of these upgrades, and that they're not in a position to lose their housing because of efficiency upgrades. There is an explicit provision in the federal guidance that requires us to require certain things of building owners and landlords after upgrades have been installed. I don't know the specifics off the top of my head, but it's things like not being able to raise rent above a fair market rate for a set period of time, things related to that. That's a question that we're actively understanding how best to uphold those provisions, and we're working with folks in the community that are experts in that area to make sure that we can equitably implement that.
So when you see the chance to make comments, definitely let us know if you have ideas. I'm positive of the answer to one of them. Manufactured homes are included in the program. And then I think there's one that's a little specific. I might skip. Okay. So we got a lot. There's definitely a few questions about sort of like how the funds are going to be allocated, and I think we've mostly answered those. And then we have a question about a web page for consumers that tells them what rebates are available for electrification. Essentially, I think it's actually someone I know's dad, so it's kind of fun. Hi, Hannah's dad, I'm pretty sure. And so, but the answer to that is we actually, if you remember from when Emily was talking, she mentioned the one-stop shop. It's actually something we seek to put together as part of launching this program to help people access the various programs, learn about them and all of that. Right now, it's not available, and that's a problem. And so we're working to fix it. We're really excited that the legislature gave us a couple positions to get to work on that. Yeah, the same question about like how contractors can kind of like get information about how to convey how rebates can be stacked and all of that. We actually also have legislative direction to figure out some training materials about the program and make sure that contractors understand how to use them and provide maximum benefits. I have a few questions that were asked to me privately that I'm going to try to deal with when we turn to the next slide. We will not miss out if other states are quicker. We expect to be quicker than most states because we hear loud and clear that Oregonians are ready for these programs, and we are well positioned compared to many other states to put together our programs. So I'm guessing we'll be at worst middle of the pack, but probably just matching our commitment as a state to energy efficiency by being early and applying. Remember that applications aren't due till January 2025, and we're planning on beating that by many months. That's our goal.
And
so with
this
that,
is
I'm going
a
to go ahead and go
formula
next
grant.
slide. What was that, Stephanie?
I was adding that this is a formula grant. So we have $114-ish million set aside for Oregon for our applications, and missing that deadline is what would put the funding in jeopardy, and we are planning to beat it.
We did get asked about applying for Quick Start. We are not planning to apply for Quick Start. We'd have to apply by the end of the year. So we just don't think we have, some states have existing programs that you can easily put money into, and ours don't match closely enough. Thanks for that question. So for that, we'd love to get to some questions for you all. You're welcome to raise your hands to answer these. You can answer in the chat. I'll kind of keep an eye on questions. I think I can stay a few minutes after to help with some questions that might be lingering for folks that want to stay a little bit late given the time, but I'd love to get into our questions for you. And again, we're asking these verbally now, but you'll get at the end, or maybe somebody will put it in now, you'll actually get a link where you can go and answer these same questions in a form, and you don't have to answer every question. You can just answer the ones you want to answer. So next slide. We'll see how we do with 8 minutes. So it's possible that home energy rebates, even when combined with other available funding sources. Oh, we have till 3:30. That's so great. I think I, for some reason, thought we had less time. Phew. Okay. Everybody hang out with us till 3:30. All right. So it is possible that the home energy rebates, even when combined with other available funding sources, will not be able to meet 100% of the cost of an electrification or efficiency upgrade for low income and moderate income households. So what comments or feedback do you have on strategies to fill the remaining gap? And would a dedicated financing offer, such as a low or no interest loan, be a solution? Again, happy to take hands, take folks off mute, or we'll just kind of sit here in awkward silence and people can type things up into the chat. All right, Aaron, go off mute and I'll tell you when I see you're ready to go. Aaron, you can go ahead with your answer to this question.
Thank you. I guess it's kind of a question in response, because I thought in one of the many webinars that have occurred on this topic that there was an indication that low-income households actually may have an opportunity to get full funding even beyond what's available directly through the HERE program via another avenue of federal funding. I know I'm being really obtuse on the specifics here, but is that something that you have more information on or have looked at?
I can jump in. So one of the things that we're going to have to juggle is, as you say, making sure that we don't overfund projects to make sure that the funding is spread around equitably. So that's going to involve working closely with other programs that are delivering incentives and rebates in the cases where more than 100% funding is available through those programs. but this question is kind of specifically getting at the homes program, which remember is that performance-based rebate program, and the rebates on that side are much more limited. So we're anticipating that even in combination with other programs, that there won't be full funding available, and it'll be challenging for people with lower and moderate incomes to access the program and participate. And we still have those Justice 40 requirements to meet within that program. So that's kind of what we're getting at with this question.
Great. I don't see any other hands up. I do see some comments in the chat related to this. I do want to clarify because I think I've maybe caused a little concern. Technically, states have until January of 2025 to apply for these funds. We in Oregon plan to apply much sooner, and since it's not competitive, it's formula, we expect that checks will roll out from the Department of Energy in the order that applications are received, and they will not be waiting until January 2025 to write checks to states that turn in applications sooner. So I think I created a fear that the feds would wait till every application was in and then start getting states their money. I think mostly we just have we have an idea. Ashlyn won a $10 million zero interest loan. Could that money be combined with homes in here? So that's a cool idea. And then folks reaching out to their local CAP agencies. Most folks seem to be saying, yeah, they think lower no interest loans would be awesome, but worried about contractors having to carry that work out. Anyway, lots of good thoughts. I might have said the wrong thing. I said Ashland won the $10 million loan. Could that money be combined? Anyway, essentially we're here to get comments from you all. We have lots of them, which is awesome. We're so glad there's so many of you here. It just makes it hard to cover everything. I'm trying to go through them quickly. Somebody brought up eWeb has zero interest loans that are available. Low-income eWeb customers can access rebates and loans, but higher income customers have to choose between them. And having loans available for higher income customers in addition to rebates may be a helpful approach. Let's see. Somebody asked if it's declared somewhere that 100% funding is the goal. And then we have somebody saying, hey, maybe 100% funding is not the answer because no-cost offers can lead to poor outcomes, including fraud, poorly designed projects. Customer underuse of equipment can make projects harder to sell since they sound too good to be true. So that's interesting too. Question if we've considered creating a green bank. There are some federal green bank programs likely to bring resources to Oregon that could be used. I believe Oregon has considered a green bank and there has been legislation proposed and it hasn't really gone anywhere in the past. There's a question in here. Is there a split percentage of weatherization versus repairs or other requirements for rebates?
No, not for the HERE program. There's not required amounts for a particular appliance or for weatherization versus appliances.
Then we have sort of the same. Oh, go ahead, Steph.
I was just going to highlight that there was a question earlier too about how we were prioritizing funding, given that it's not going to reach everyone. And I would say that that's a point that we would appreciate input on. So if you have ideas about how the funding should be prioritized and how it should be rolled out, we would love to have additional input.
And then I'm going to be imperfect if everybody can handle it for a second. I know, shocking. I think we might have a question related to this that we're asking for input on, which has to do with kind of that broad question. Like if there's a $14,000 limit, will contractors just automatically make things $14,000? Somebody mentioned eWeb having a requirement for multiple bids in order to receive a rebate as one potential fix. Do we have a question on that? Should we wait for that conversation or do we want to answer that as a question and then move on to the next slide?
I don't think we have a question in the slide specifically on fraud. I would be very open and would really value discussion on that. I think that's a obvious concern and something that we want to be certain to address. I will also say, I think on the question of covering 100% of funding, the federal government has made it very clear that, at least on the HERE side of things, they want this to really benefit low-income households. And I think in a lot of situations, it's very difficult to expect those households to pay anything out of pocket for some of these upgrades based on previous program experience and what the research kind of supports. So I do think that that's where that goal of covering 100% of costs for those households comes from, is to make sure that we can serve those communities. And we certainly are sensitive to the issue of fraud and to that concern. And that's something that we would very much enjoy having a discussion on, and it's one of the top priority items as we design the program for figuring out how to have the appropriate levels of oversight. And I'll just add that every state is dealing with the same issues, and so there will be some resources from the federal government to help states navigate those kinds of challenges.
Great. There's really just one other thing that I want to say from the current sort of stack. Well, first I'll say, Brian, for your Ashland question, we have I got a nice answer from our federal grants officer, Emily, for you in the chat, if you want to look for that. And then there was some talk about job training. And I just want to share that there is, I call it a sidecar. There's a sort of a sidecar to this program that we're working on an application for due in November regarding training, workforce training. And there's also competitive funds likely to come down the road. The Fed saw that there'd be workforce considerations with launching this program in the states. And so we do have both $2 million from the state, an additional $2 million formula funds from the feds that we are applying for very soon, and then additional competitive funds to help bolster our existing training programs. We have lots of good training programs in the state already. So helping them either reach new audiences, help create more avenues for people to enroll in those programs that work for them. Lots of different ideas that are out there. So kind of stay tuned on the workforce stuff, but just know that's definitely something we're working on. And I think on that, I will go ahead and have us go to the next slide. I know there's still some more comments, but I can't read everybody's out loud. And yes, Aaron, we know the application is due in January. We're still turning it in a little sooner than that so we can turn our focus to getting this one in early. I guess now there is a question. Let's just go ahead and go to the next one. So how can ODO ensure rebates reach low-income and disadvantaged communities that live in multifamily housing? And what considerations should be made to encourage landlords to allow for energy efficient upgrades that benefit their tenants? So we're looking for your ideas here. The chat is fine, or raise your hand and we can call on you.
There were a couple of earlier comments that maybe fit in here. There's a note about outreach to people of color and underrepresented groups, that there's been a challenge making those trainings and outreach culturally appropriate for communities that have not historically had the same opportunities or connections to participate. Thank you for that comment. There's also a question about funding to community-based organizations to help with outreach to low-income populations. So appreciate both of those comments. We're still exploring how program implementation is going to look, and figuring out what portions of the work we want to either grant out or contract out with others to help support the implementation and outreach. So those are great suggestions for us to explore. Mm-hmm.
All right, I don't see any hands up. I do see a lot of comments. We're definitely going to need to spend some time reading through the comments because I'm just not able to verbally get out to all of them. We do have a couple of questions in the mix now, even though they're a little off topic right this second. They're going to get lost if I don't ask them. There's a question that's about augmenting low-income weatherization programs. And I think I can just say does someone want to kind of get into how like we're able to kind of work with those programs, but we can't replace them? However you want to, you know what I mean? If one of you two could dig in on that for a second. Oh, and then I'll get to the raised hand in just a second.
Yeah, so we have been talking with our partners over in housing and really thinking hard about how our programs integrate with the existing low-income weatherization programs. Those programs have a couple of changes that are coming online kind of around the same timing as the start of our proposed programs. And it's going to allow us to do some work together within these programs. Specifically, we're seeing that the HERE program can come in and do certain upgrades, and it won't have an impact on that same household being able to access the weatherization program when they come up in the queue or once they get gotten to in those programs. Because as you may be familiar with, those programs are kind of longstanding and ongoing, but they can only help so many people per year. So we see these programs layering together and not being mutually exclusive.
And we hang out with our friends that work on those programs to talk about this a lot. So, and we'll continue to talk more and more to them as we put these together. It's really important that we work together. I got a question about what options there are that renters can access without landlord approval and that they could take with them when they leave. And I don't think, is there anything for that scenario?
Yeah, that's an
The
interesting
example
question.
was a portable heat pump or an induction stove.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I don't know off the top of my head. I think that's something that we could discuss with the U.S. Department of Energy to understand what their thinking is on that. But my understanding is that it's based around the household and the building at this time.
There's some other comments in here sort of related to that push-pull between kind of getting benefits to tenants, but not setting it up so that a landlord can take advantage of these programs, and then the tenants are not protected when there's market affordability changes as a result. And some feedback about making sure things aren't first come, first serve. And then I guess I need to get to Clay, but go ahead, Emily.
I'm sorry, if I could just chime in on that last question. There is guidance in the ALRD, which is the rules from the federal government. So if rebates are directly requested by renters, written permission from the building owner or authorized agent for the home efficiency project must be obtained before commencing work.
Clay, go ahead. You're off mute.
Hi, thanks, Christy. And just kind of this aligns with the last two comments and conversations. We're seeing some renter customer segment or consumer segment penetration in California. And my understanding is it's because the state doesn't require landlords to make a refrigerator or most appliances available in the unit they rent, which means that a lot of renters end up having the leeway to take advantage of statewide rebates or utility rebates or what have you to get appliances that they can. So it'd be interesting to see if Oregon, what the Oregon statutes are there.
Yeah, thanks for that, Clay. That's helpful and something we can check on what Oregon requires regarding appliances and rental units.
I have a question, again, just one that's kind of random. I'm just going to take it. I don't know how else to deal with the random questions, and I want to be responsive. So sorry if it's like we're all over the place, but also trying to be responsive. Just know I'm like trying my best to deal with that struggle. There's a question of if a heat pump install cost is $12K, whether the program would cover 50% of the cost or just $4,000, 50% of the $8,000 cap. And I'm pretty sure that I know that the answer is it would cover 50% of the cost up to the $8,000.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay, so I think everything I'm seeing here are comments. There's a lot of comments here. and a lot of different, like, hey, you should talk to Oregon Community Solar. You should talk to just different, there's a contractor who's got ideas. So saying we should giving us his email address and everything. And things we should think about, like, have we talked to landlords, getting to that. Yeah, energy utilities, we've totally had them help with outreach for our new heat pump programs. They're a great partner. Question about, does it cover mobile home parks where the residents own the mobile homes but not rent the space, but rent the space we're in? Yes, that qualifies. Interestingly, by the way, this is a Scott Morris, listen to this answer. On mobile home parks where residents own the mobile homes but rent the space, they count as renters for Oregon's rental heat pump program, and therefore that program's statewide. So you may want to look into that because that's open now and has a decent sized rebate available. Don't ask me how much right off the top of my head right now, but check it out. Okay. I think I'll move us to the next slide. Lots of really great ideas and comments, and just because I'm not saying them doesn't mean they're not great. We'll make sure we take a close look. Comments. And then rebates will also, this is the next question. Rebates will also support the economy and jobs, such as contractors who will install energy upgrades. How can Odo use these funds to meet the US DOE goal of supporting minority-owned and woman-owned and veteran-owned businesses? And then thanks, Emily, for once again posting the link for folks to either raise their hand, answer in the chat, or there's a form where you can provide us answers to all of these or any of these questions and get back to us that way. With that, I'll see if any hands come up, and otherwise feel free to continue to add things to the chat for us to review in a detailed fashion later and cover a little bit now.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in. I saw a question, someone asking you if this is separate from the Oregon State rebate. So yes, we are right now talking about the federal rebate programs that are coming to the state that are not established yet. There are existing state level programs that we talked about that are open now or will be opening sooner than these programs. And you can find information about those on our website. We can provide a link to some of those state level programs that are coming.
Great. Yeah, I can do that now. Clay, you can go ahead in just a second. Okay, Clay, go ahead. Oh, Clay maybe didn't mean to have his hand up again. I'm not sure what happened, but I think we're good. All right. We have a question about, aren't a lot of heat pumps well over 8,000? So even if eligible for the full amount, it would not cover that piece. Any thoughts on that?
I can speak to the price of heat pumps. Yes. If you're looking at a comprehensive heat pump system that covers your whole home, often they are well above that $8,000 range. A smaller installation that would maybe just provide heating and cooling for like a partial load of the space would be under that. But as Will noted, to be eligible for the HERE program, you would need a heat pump to be the primary heating source for heating and cooling source for your home. So yes, in many instances, the total cost is going to be higher than the rebate cap.
And then I'll just add on to that and clarify that we have no control over that rebate cap. So that's set by the Federal Department of Energy.
Great. All right. And some people are answering that question in the chat as well. Somebody's bringing up avoiding the mistakes of the ARA grants where new contractors were encouraged so strongly, and a lot of those companies kind of struggled. So a note there from one person on that. Mostly though, it doesn't seem like folks have a lot of comments unless they're on this question, unless they're just still writing longer answers. So we can maybe move on to the next one, but please know you're welcome to complete your answer in the chat. Oh, Clay, you're back. Clay, you're here. Your hand is up again. Are you ready to go now?
Yeah, pardon me. I was pressing a bunch of buttons that I was trying to, anyway, unmute
So
myself.
maybe
doing that
go
work.
back a slide because I think Clay's got a comment on the last slide, and then we'll come to this.
And
Thanks.
this may already be, your approach for solicitations. However, ensuring that you're requesting some percentage of a proposed project with an RFP solicitation to include a percentage of disadvantaged business spend, whether it's through a subcontractor or the prime itself. I don't know if that actually hits on this particular requirement. However, that's my 2 cents.
Thanks, Clay. All right, we'll go to the next slide now. Thank you. All right. US DOE gives this, we've talked about retroactivity a fair amount. I guess just the question here is what considerations should we take into account as we design this program around the technical logistics and the challenge to meeting equity requirements if retroactivity is allowed for the HOMES program? Interestingly, the first comment here is if the point is to encourage action, why would you provide incentives retroactively? It just sounds like a waste of money. So that's to the point. I think that is our concern, that the money would go extra fast and maybe to people who had the funds to do the project versus if the program is intended to go to low to moderate income folks who wouldn't have that money to begin with. Oh, thanks. Zach just did my job for me. So Zach Mulholland, thank you. Nice to see you, by the way. Just put in the link to our heat pumps program. And if the HVAC won't last until next spring, then I think looking into the state programs that are launching imminently in most regions of the state would be a good place, or thinking about the tax credit as possibly something to help make that happen. Cool. Again, not seeing just a ton of chatter or hands up on this retroactivity question. So feel free to go ahead and answer into the chat. Oh, Clay's back. All right, Clay, let's hear it.
Yeah,
And then we'll move on to the next slide.
To bolster Jeremy's statement, that completely agreed, reflect the policy priorities. Is it equity or is the priority equity or getting the money spent?
All right. So next slide. HOMES rebate amounts will not cover 100% of project costs, and while stacking with other programs is possible, it is likely that some of the project costs will need to be covered by the participant. Despite this, do you have any recommendations and considerations for reaching Justice 40 and other disadvantaged communities with this program? And again, oh, Clay, go ahead.
Maybe it's time to continue advancing whatever bill that is with the state of Oregon for a green bank, because it's proving useful in California as one comparable.
Yeah.
I also see a note from Jeremy on this about targeting rental housing and targeting landlords who maybe do have some funds to contribute to projects to try to reach the number of participants and projects in the Justice 40 communities that we're trying to reach. And that's something that we have been looking at, as well as partnering with other multifamily targeted programs, including some of the LIHEAP programs that target, they have multifamily aspects, and then our utilities, some of them also have multifamily programs. So thank you for that. That's something that we have started to explore.
And on this one, I'm also hearing about money for community-based organizations to help with outreach. It's a great idea and one we've been thinking about too. We did get a little bit of feedback on the retroactivity. Most folks on retroactivity seem to be saying like, it doesn't really make a lot of sense, but there is a concern about how customers sort of stopped installing, waiting for this program to come online. We are aware of that, and we're hoping the state programs coming online will really help with that in addition to the tax credits. But totally hear that concern and wanted to honor that because it's one we've also heard and also thought quite a bit about. And Charity, who's on the line and is one of the state experts on this work, we're really grateful that you've joined us today. Talking about without 100% funding, it'll be really hard to reach Justice 40 requirements. So it could work in places like Portland where there's PSEF to help fund the other side of it. But that was her take. Somebody brought up long-term loans, collaborating with entities who have funds to stack. Absolutely. Training on how to apply rebates would be helpful. And Charity brings up that CBOs can do more than just outreach. They could even administer an entire install program like they're doing in Portland. Great press on community energy projects work in Portland this week. And then will there be funding for, the question is, will there be funding for CBOs to do this? I think it's an option, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We are actively looking at whether or not this should be a primarily state administered program or whether we have community partners that have capacity to take on this work, whether that's through existing utility incentive programs, through CBOs or other organizations. And we have been working on starting to meet with those groups to hear from them about their interest and capacity to join us in the effort to deliver this program. So absolutely want to continue hearing from you if you have specific suggestions of people we should be talking to on that front.
And then this is also a perfect place. I meant to do it on the first one that talked about getting like stacking incentives in the general category. And then I forgot, but the Energy Trust of Oregon question, how will these programs work with existing programs? And we've kind of answered that here and there that, you know, you can braid, you can or stack incentives in order to get to a higher rebate. The other thing I'll say with Energy Trust of Oregon, how often are you all meeting with them on this program? Like every other week or something?
Yeah, I think every other week, but consistent.
Yeah. So we, you know, for those who don't know, Energy Trust of Oregon provide really similar programming to something like 65% of the customers. They don't provide to 65% of the customers in the state, like each one, but the territory they serve reflects about 65% of the customers in the state. And so they're a really important partner, just like Oregon Housing and Community Services, folks like Community Energy Project, I just mentioned Charity, folks like the CAP agencies that are doing this type of work. We're really trying to make sure we work closely with everyone to figure out how to make these programs all work together. So hopefully that's a more specific answer on ETO than we'd given in sort of the general coverage earlier. Like I'd be super curious. I bet there's at least one person from ETO on this call, if not multiple.
I think Robert actually has his hand up. And,
oh, great.
Will,
wait,
you
please do. Go ahead, Robert. How do we want to do this? It sounds like good question, Thomas. I'm going to handle that question first. We met with general managers from consumer-owned utilities recently, and our plan is to actually hold a meeting with consumer-owned utilities. Remember, I mentioned this is like our kickoff. We're doing a couple meetings next week, and then we're planning on doing outreach to the consumer-owned utilities to see about doing a couple of webinars with just consumer-owned utilities and offering to meet one-on-one with consumer-owned utilities. Our goal is to actually get like a cabinet of consumer-owned utility staff who do this work to kind of serve in that same role that some of the other folks that are doing that existing work. We just haven't organized that conversation yet, but it's on our to-do list. So sorry I feel really bad because we work with consumer and utilities really closely, and to have not like already said that was a big fail on my part. But we did kind of lay out that plan to the general managers when we met with them maybe a month ago. And so then we have Clay again, and then Robert, you were on. I guess you're gone. You're probably okay. Clay, do you want to go ahead again? And then we'll go to the next
I think
slide.
this time it was an aberration.
Oh, okay. No, Clay. All right. So why don't we go to the next slide? And then Robert was trying to, he can't unmute himself, but what he was trying to say is that he's here and he's working closely with us. All right, we have 5 minutes left, so let's see if we can get through these really quickly. So here allows for rebates on a variety of appliances, including electric heat pumps, heat pump water heaters, electric stoves, heat pump clothes dryers, weatherization measures, and electric wiring and breakers. Which of these technologies do you think are most beneficial to low-income communities? And again, you can raise your hand, put it in the chat, or answer with the form that we'll put in one more time before we close down in 5 minutes. And then as you think about that too, appliance replacement often occurs in emergency situations, like your furnace stops working. How can HERE equip contractors to deliver efficient electric appliances in those situations? And we've got some heat pump water heaters, immediate bill savings being brought up. And some people really like the eWeb and ETO heat pump water heater programs. And Charity's saying a lot of people need all the things. And there's a plug for an electrification fair this Saturday from 11 to 3 with a link to Electrify Portland to learn more about that in the chat. And weatherization and heat pumps, not one without the other. Some good pilots on emergency replacement at the Cal Tech program, or maybe just it's all caps CA Tech. Maybe that's not Cal Tech program that addresses that issue. Stoves are essential because of indoor air concerns. I'm just reading from the comments here. And then heat pumps and heat pump water heaters, another plug there because they're and replacing anything that causes pollution. Some other lists flowing in. And thanks everyone for the comments. Clay, you ready? And then we'll go to the next slide.
Yeah, thanks, Christy. So the first question, the electric heat pump, the heat pump water heater, there's great energy savings that can support folks' energy bills, who are struggling to pay their bills currently. The electric stove or induction stove option, another big useful item. Heat pump clothes dryers are, from my understanding, that tech is kind of difficult because it takes forever to dry your clothes with those items. So it's still kind of that tech needs to be advanced further. So you might have some pretty upset people with that tech is just as far as low communities are concerned. I'm speaking from the point of view of a online marketplace provider, so I can't speak to electrical wiring and breakers just on account of that. And then when we look at that second question, emergency situations, I want to go down the road and buy something, or frankly, I want to go online and buy something and have the installation and the haul away of the broken item bundled in and just get it done. Attempting to deal with a contracting network is not an emergency replacement thing from the point of view of an e-commerce organization where we're folks just want to do it fast online and have it bundled, and they want that rebate instantly. And I think that goes, that goes into the low income too.
I'm gonna cut off. If it's okay, we're like done in 1 minute, and I would love to end with our slide on next steps, if that's okay with you.
Certainly.
Thank you so much. So I think, do I turn it over for Emily to end us? Or I can just do it if you want.
Yeah, I'll wrap us up. No worries. I just wanted to thank everybody for showing up today. It's been so insightful. We are gathering all of your comments and your questions, and this is just the beginning of these conversations. So please, please join us again next week if you have further questions or more technical questions. We will be focusing specifically on homes on Tuesday and then specifically on here on Wednesday. And of course, you'll see the comment portal there and Stephanie and Will's contact information. And I will drop our website to the federal funding page, which has a lot of information, not just on homes in here, but a lot of the other programs we're working on that are going to be really helpful to Oregonians on that page. So thank you so much for joining us.
We have a question about the time next week. Bethany, the upcoming deep dives for homes is Tuesday, 10/10 at 2. That's October 10th. And for here, that's Wednesday, October 11th at 2 o'clock. No, sorry, I guess somebody answered you in the chat. I was just scrolling down still. Thanks everyone for joining us.
Thanks, Christy, for moderating the chat and the comments and the questions. It's been really helpful.
I skipped a question. Kathleen, if you're still hanging out, I want to talk to you for a second because it looks like you're still here. You asked a question that was specific to you as someone who survived a wildfire, which I'm so sorry to hear that you had to endure that. If it was a 2020 wildfire, I'm going to put my name in the chat and you should write me because we have some incentive programs open now for wildfire survivors from the 2020 fire season, which I know might not be that helpful and might seem really unfair if it wasn't 2020. But I would love it if you reached out because I think we'd love to see what we can do to help you out, even if there's nothing specific in this federal program that treats wildfire survivors any differently. So if you heard that, I'm putting the wrong email address. So let me fix that first, and then you don't need to send anything to my personal email probably. So now you have that email. Feel free to reach out, and I can give you some personal service. And we did put that form that you can fill out to answer any of the questions that we had. One more time, thanks for asking again, Zach. And seriously, nice to see you, Zach. It's been a long time. And I'm happy to stick around for another minute or so in case anybody has any other questions. I know most folks have peeled off, and then we'll go ahead and close the webinar in like a minute or two. If there's questions, we'll keep it open. If we're talking, we'll keep it open. But if it's quiet, we'll shut it down. All right, we feel good. Everybody ready to say bye? All right.